Story time. How impact happens. We want you to have a competitive advantage. So let's talk about how impact happens. It's probably not what you think. Hi, Trudy Beerman here of Influence Media PSI TV. We're all about influential reach and media. Let's go. What we're going to look at today is once upon a time. Yes, I'm going to tell you a story. What the Bible says, what research says, your part, our part, and how the story ends. Hang with me. When we think of impact, we think of this kind of thing. A punch is thrown and immediate impact is felt. And that is one way that impact happens. And when we think about the space of business or making a speech or about a book, it would be so awesome if you shared your message and someone was instantly receiving their transformation. Not that it never happens that way, but it doesn't always happen that way. That does not mean impact has not happened. So this is the way most people think impact happens, and it absolutely does happen this way, but that's not the only way impact happens. So let's take a look. Once upon a time, there was a young boy who grew up in a remote part of the country of Jamaica. He was very poor, didn't have shoes to wear to school most of the time. And as he would say in his own words, he grew 3 inches out of his pants. He grew tall and his pants did not grow with him. But he was attending an event at a church. He was going to church and there was a guest speaker. That guest speaker made a presentation. And that little boy, his life was changed. His life was so changed that as he got older, he got better jobs and found better mentors who influenced him even further. And eventually he became probably an international celebrity, if not well known by the world, well known by millions of people in a certain area or a certain niche. Now, this story is a true story. This book here is Living by Faith. The man you see on this book is my father, Dr. Jerry Gallimore, and he wrote this book about his life, about how he lived by faith and how God showed up for him time and time again. He was the poor boy in the story who grew up in the remote parts of Jamaica in the country, very poor, and went on to do amazing things. But we're going to see how that story pans out in a little bit. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 7 through 9, so neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. He who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his wages according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. So he who plants and he who waters, and then we have the growth, okay? Somebody plants, somebody waters, and magically, or not so magically, there's a harvest, there's growth. Maybe you're beginning to catch on where this story is going. Stick with me. Here's another Bible passage. I picked it up in 2 versions because the King James Version had me scratching my head for many, many years. It says in Ecclesiastes 11, verse 1, cast thy bread upon the waters, thou shalt find it after many days. So as a child, I used to think very literally. And in truth, at my age, I still approach the Bible first from a very literal perspective. And then after I've looked at the literal perspective, then I try to catch the concept. But I always start with the literal. So this one really threw me for a little while. The complete Jewish Bible reads it this way: send your resources out over the seas. Eventually you will reap a return. Reap a return. Reap a return. Doesn't that sound like impact to you? You had a resource, you did something with it, and you reap a return, you had an impact. Your money has found a return. So keep that in mind, okay? You sent your resources out overseas and you got a return. All right, keep that in mind. Now, research says, and this is peer-reviewed, okay? Peer-reviewed research, and they were looking at the ripple effect of a community-based health program, okay? So they had all these women and they did different versions of the experiment. They always have a control group, and then they compare an X and a Y variable. And they found that in the conclusion, relationship closeness rather than spatial closeness played an important role in influencing a rural community with the health intervention. Now, this should excite all of us, okay? Because you do not have to be within the same room to have impact. They found that relationship closeness rather than spatial closeness suggests geographically you are within close proximity to that person. Now, it's easy to understand from that picture of the punch that proximity, immediate proximity is a way to have impact. But this research is showing that that's not necessary. You do not need to be in the same geographic space to have impact and to make this ripple effect of influence and impact. These researchers found that relationship closeness rather than spatial closeness played an important influential role. Guys, when you come on television, you are not spatially close to the people, or even if you do video, you're not spatially close to the people who are listening, who are watching you. But you can build a relationship with people over time through video. It is the next best way to connect with people, where they can see you emote, see you move, hear your voice, look into your eyes, okay? And begin to decide if they like you, if they trust you. So relationship closeness rather than spatial closeness can create impact. This is huge. And this is partly why I do what I do. So here's another research, okay? These are all within the last 3 years, guys. I know the year isn't showing, but when I do research, many of you may know I'm a doctoral candidate. That means I'm in the research phase of my research of my dissertation. So I'm always in the academic research documents. And peer review simply means the person who wrote it, others of their peers vetted it and said, yes, this is good. Okay, so that's what peer review means. Now, this research was on sex education, and they were looking at peer-led sex education. Not the teachers now, their peers. Somebody from their peers. So what they concluded, so it's like, they had, instead of the usual teacher-led sex education, they had peer educators, 16 and 17-year-olds who were trained. And what was the conclusion? Compared with conventional sex education at age 13 through 14, so the teachers who were the peers, 16 through 17, were teaching the 13 through 14-year-olds. It was not associated with change in teenage abortions, but may have led to fewer teenage births, and was popular with the students. This is important because a lot of you are sharing your story. When you share your story of your past and how you overcame something, and you speak to others who resonate with your story, this is like the peer-led instruction. Students connect and resonate much quicker with their peers than they did with the teacher. The peers had a bigger impact on the students. The 16 and 17-year-old instructors had a bigger impact on the 13, 14-year-olds than the teachers did. Some of you are sharing your lived experience Okay, you may not have credentials and certifications and licenses, but you have lived through an experience, and you come and you share that experience with others, and they can live vicariously through your story. They can see themselves in your story, learn the lesson you've learned without having to experience the pain that you may have overcome. These research pieces are very exciting for you. And when you're a guest on television, I'm showing you how these researches are suggesting that you guys can really have impact, even if you're not in the immediate proximity of the person that you're speaking to, and even if you don't have all the credentials and the licenses and certification. Guys, you are making an impact. And that's why PSI TV is so excited to talk with you, share your story with our television audience. So let's keep going. Now, remember that picture I showed you of my father, the poor boy in the country who did not even have shoes to wear to school for a long time. He went to a church event, and a speaker spoke. His life was touched. His life was changed. And because of him becoming a Christ follower and living for Jesus and all the miracles and things that happened in his life that he shared in his book, here's where that poor Jamaican boy ended up. Amsterdam 2000. Now, my father is 84 years old, okay? So he's old now. But in the year 2000, which was 23 years ago at the moment of this recording, that poor Jamaican boy ended up a plenary speaker at Amsterdam 2000. Amsterdam 2000 was a Billy Graham Foundation event. More than 10,000 participants, all itinerant evangelists. What are those? Evangelists. So this was a leader of leaders event. The difference between just leading people and leading leaders is there is an exponential impact, because leaders go back to their congregation, to their audience, and they influence their audience. So when you're a leader of leaders, when you influence leaders, leaders go back with that influence and impact their audience. So when 10,000 leaders come from 185 countries to hear, and my father is a plenary speaker, and according to the results, I mean, they were blown away by what he had to say, okay? That is the impact. Now, that little pastor who spoke at the church when my father was 15 years old never lived to see how my father turned out. Now, my father was one of a handful of people that were in the audience, and they all heard the same message. But he is the one whose life was transformed to the point where this is one of the many results that he talks about in his book. The point I'm getting at is whose life will change because of your message, because of your solution. Whose life? Now, the thing is that you may never know. You may never know, because some plant, some water, somebody who hears your message today may be the seed that was planted in their life, and later on somebody else comes along and says something else, that's the water, and then all of a sudden the harvest comes. This is the thing, we may not ever see the impact of what we have done, but never think for a minute that you're not having an impact. You might be having a ripple effect that you don't even know about. You drop the pebble, you drop your message, you share your product, you share your solution, and it may have that immediate impact on a single person. You might even know about those, but you don't know about the ripple effect. And that is what I wanted to share with you today. I want you to understand that impact is not just when you're in that proximity, that geographic space. You make the punch, you make the hit, and it's felt immediately. Sometimes these transformations do not happen immediately or for you to see and experience. What is your next step? We love talking to experts, authors, coaches, business owners on PSI TV. we want to make sure your message is in alignment with what our channel's all about, with what our audiences have come to expect. So not every applicant will get selected, but for the most part, we have made a television appearance very easy compared to how it was in the past. This is one of the things we do struggle to overcome. A lot of people still assume TV is like it was in the past, where it was hard to get an opportunity. You pitch, and people just don't respond, or it costs a brutal amount of money. We like to say that for the cost of a date night with your husband, with your spouse, with your bae, you can be a guest on PSI TV. So if that's your next step, then fantastic. At the end of it all, our goal is to get you influential reach. When you appear on television, on PSI television, I can't speak for all television channels. When you appear on PSI TV, our goal is to get you influential reach. We share your content across minimum of 17 platforms. And depending on a package, we will even guarantee you views. So definitely consider this as an option in your marketing plan. Trudy Beerman here, super simple to find. Thank you so much for joining me live or later. I do look forward to connecting.